Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
That kid is back on the escalator again.
Ain't gonna hurt.
Here's my boomstick!
Game over, man. It's game over.
Welcome to the Bargain Bin. He is your host, Ben Mason.
And he is your co-host, Sandra Luketic. And today we're talking 1999's Ravenous. We assume if you're listening to this episode, you have already seen the movie. And to join us for this wonderful conversation, Sandra, of a movie that I'm sure you absolutely loved, we have freelance journalist, podcaster, the wonderful Rachel Reeves joining us. Rachel, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you guys for the first time talking about this incredible movie, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts.
Super curious. You sent us a list when we asked you to be on of movies that you were curious or interested in talking about, and this one kind of topped that list. Can you give me an idea of why this was number one, or did it just happen to be the first one that came to mind?
It happened to be the one that came first to my mind, but it's also just one that I adore, and I don't think it's talked about enough. And I don't know. I think it was also like winter, and so I was feeling like chilly and thinking about like winter movies and which ones that, you know, I just like, and this one fits the bill and checks all those boxes for me.
Yeah, totally get that too. As soon as I threw it on, I realized this is the perfect movie for this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great, you know, snowy winter movie that I don't generally see thought of in that way. But yeah, the second you put it on, it's like, oh yeah, this feels right.
Wrap yourself up in a blanket. Grab yourself a nice warm bowl of stew.
Yep.
And pop on a movie.
Look out the window at that questionable snow.
Yeah. Yep.
I have it in my notes, but yeah, this movie, I normally ask Sandro when he first saw this movie. Normally, It's the first time he's seen it is getting ready for this show. But Sandro, when had you first seen Ravenous?
This week when I watched it for
course. That's I'm not surprised. Rachel,
you're welcome.
When did you first see this?
Okay, I can't really talk. So this is one that actually my husband recommended because he is not. I'm a big horror fan, you guys. I don't know if you know that, but yeah. So I like a lot of horror movies, and I write a lot about horror movies. And when we first started dating, he was like, "Oh, have you seen Ravenous?" Like, you know, he's not a huge horror fan, but this is one that he was like, I love this movie. And so I hadn't seen it. And so, yeah, I probably got familiar with it about 5 years ago and just instantly was
wow.
Where's this been all my life? Like, how have I missed this? So, yeah, it was great.
What a weird recommend from a non-horror fan.
Yeah, well, but I think that's, you know, it's interesting because it's not necessarily horror in the way that I don't know. It's one of those that kind of blurs the lines, I think. Like, yes, obviously there's some gore and some violence that we're going to get into. And, you know, obviously there's the whole cannibal thing. There's that. But there's a lot of it that doesn't necessarily lean that way. And I think that there's a lot of elements that make it a little bit more accessible for folks, even if they're not necessarily big horror fans.
Accurate. And I think we get that from the very beginning with the two quotes that we get. Sandro, I can tell you hate this fucking movie already.
No. It's directly to the reference to the two quotes. Because I can see exactly what Rachel is saying in regards to why her husband might have recommended this movie. It doesn't feel like a traditional horror movie. It definitely carried a very different vibe for me. But these two quotes set me off on the wrong foot because they have a bit of a tone that doesn't match the seriousness of what's to follow. So the whole time I'm like, why are these quotes here?
Well, that's peppered throughout the film. Like this weird bit of comedy that almost seems shoehorned in. But this is a very quirky film. I mean, listen to the soundtrack, which I just finished listening to for the third time today. It doesn't seem to fit, much like the humor, but the movie itself is so odd that it all just actually meshes together incredibly well. So I was very thrown off by your reaction to these quotes.
No, honestly, good or bad, like or dislike the movie, this quote, this exact moment, especially on the second viewing when I knew what was ahead of me, was the only part that just didn't feel like it fit in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's peppered with little bits of ridiculous things. Like if it's a quote like this, like I said, the soundtrack, there are certain bits of humor throughout the movie that originally I didn't think fit, but I enjoyed the levity to the situation, because otherwise it just seems like it's like the seriousness, the tension, the drama is just being crammed down your throat. So having these little bits to break it up, I found rather enjoyable.
Yeah. I also think when you're thinking about, like, if you really analyze it and you're looking at some of like the taboos and the contradictions that we're seeing and some of the kind of social commentary or conversations that are being had underneath with these characters and what's happening, that those slightly more, lighthearted moments really help keep it from getting a little bit too weighed down by all of that. So I think I always appreciate that, but it is kind of interesting. It is a weird kind of juxtaposition that it's a bold choice, but I don't know. It's 1999 when this came out, right? So I guess, anything goes, and I'm here for it.
Maybe I just expect my moments of humor to be, humorous.
Yeah. I can understand that. I think it is. It caught me off guard the first time too, because it's like, wait, what is this? But I don't know. There's something very endearing about it just for that reason, I think.
Yeah, I caught this in 99 when it hit VHS. So
you did?
17-year-old me was very confused as to what was happening. And 17-year-old me hated what I saw.
That's interesting.
But I've watched it here and there throughout the years, and like multiple times in the last couple of days. And opinions have changed.
Wow, man, can't believe you were only 17 in 99. You're like 100 years old now.
Yeah, I feel like it. But I think some of this might not be intentional, some of the quirkiness, because we are dealing with a movie that had more than one director. A director who left relatively early on, but we don't know how much was actually filmed. I tried to listen to all 3 commentary tracks on the DVD. The commentary tracks, the pairing make no sense to me of who's doing it. The first track is the director and Damon Albarn, who recommended her as a replacement from the first director. The second commentary track is just Robert Carlyle by himself. And the third is the writer, Ted Griffin, and Jeffrey Jones. So it's a strange mashup of creatives and performers that don't really lend well to each other. So a lot of the questions I was looking to have answered by watching these never got answered.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot of hands on this movie, and it makes me. I remember I have watched that commentary with Antonia Bird before, and it makes me curious to just think about like what it initially was planned to be, and just like I always wonder about like how nervous studios get, and like I mean you think about Morbius, right? Like,
oh my god!
Like just I'm just using this as an example because at one point I interviewed somebody involved with the production, and they were like, "Yeah, let's just say the movie we made is not the movie that got released," and it was just very much like. Yeah, they got nervous and just started cutting it to pieces. So it's like that kind of thing where I'm curious like what they thought they were shooting at the time and then how that changed once it got into the post-production process. But that to be said, it's no Morbius. I do think it's better than that.
Morbius is one of my favorite, if not my favorite comic book character of all time.
Oh,
so I had heard.
I'm sorry.
I had heard going into it that it was a disaster. I'm like, well, maybe it's not that bad. It was that bad. It was worse than what I had been told. But at least I got to see Morbius on the big screen.
It's just so funny. Like sometimes I just feel like it's like these big studios are like your parents, right? And they're just like, I don't know. I just don't know if they can handle this. And they just get like so nervous. And it's just like, just trust your audiences, trust your kids, trust the people you hired to make the movie. But anyways, that's a tangent.
And it's something I can talk about at length. But
I love that Ben's bar at this point is, well, at least I got to see it on the big screen.
It exists.
This is the perfect "we have Morbius at home" meme. Because what I saw was not the character that I know and love other than in name.
Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Well, luckily we're not talking about Morbius tonight. So,
right. Yeah.
But I guess, we can talk about Ravenous, much like Morbius. It's a movie that we can dive into, really sink our teeth into.
Okay, get used to those puns.
I love it. I'm a sucker for a good pun.
Oh my God, I'm the minority.
Okay, well, you're only going to get bad ones, so sorry to disappoint.
No, those are the best ones. What are you talking about?
All right, what do you say hop right into this plot?
I thought we already did.
Oh yeah,
with the quotes.
That's fine. We'll get into the actual plot. So we get the setting 1847 during the Mexican-American War. Second Lieutenant John Boyd, played by the wonderful Guy Pearce, who we haven't really seen much in Hollywood at this point, other than really big blockbuster. Well, it wasn't a blockbuster, but a big title like L.A. Confidential. He's being promoted to captain for an act of bravery, allowing U.S. soldiers to capture a Mexican command post. Immediately, we get the meal at this dinner. So off-putting. Bloody steak on a plate. It triggers Boyd to have a nightmarish flashback of laying in a cart of bloody corpses, instantly making him vomit at the table. Great setup for a character trait, sure, but also we know what we're getting into for this movie. We know it's about cannibalism to an extent. We know he's dealt with, being buried under bloody corpses. He can't look at bloody steak without getting physically ill. So we know that this is going to be a problem for him moving forward. So we cut to General Slauson, R.I.P. John Spencer, berating Boyd for his cowardice and shipping him off to the remote Fort Spencer in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And here we get our first solid taste of this strange musical score. I hated this. Hated
what?
it. No, not now.
Oh, okay.
Let me clarify. 17-year-old me wanted to turn this movie off, and it always stood out to me as being completely out of place. But Michael Nyman, his group, I forget the name, unfortunately, I forgot to make a note of it, are comprised of non-musicians. That mixed with Damon Albarn, what are our thoughts on this?
I love it.
Right? It gets so good.
This is one of my, I hate that this is not available. On vinyl, it kills me. I think that just the way it operates, the fact that these two pieces, these two musicians came together is so weird and interesting.
Oh, completely.
But I just think that the choices they made, it's weird, it's quirky. It just really plays with the idea that, something is off out here. It's so unique, I think. And yeah. Anyways.
I don't think anybody expected a squeeze box to play such a prominent role in a score.
Yeah.
Specifically one set in this time period. But the more I watched it, and like I said, I've watched this movie a lot in the last few days. Every time I hear it, I like it more and more. Mm-hmm. Sandro, musical thoughts?
I don't want to answer.
Okay.
No, do it. No, this is great. If everybody agreed on everything, it would be boring, right? So
I hated it the first time I watched the movie. And the second time I watched the movie, it didn't grow on me at all. I hated it even more.
What?
I commend them for, some key terms I heard Rachel throw out there, unique and different and blending, and none of them worked for me.
Okay.
I just I always admire let's also Damon Albarn, Blur, the Gorillas, which is obviously huge. And I just think this is such an interesting departure for him. And I also just always admire people that are willing to kind of play what film music can be, not necessarily what is expected or what it should be. And we're, talking about the humor and that kind of weird tone. Like if it had that tone and had a more traditional, orchestral score, it would be even stranger. Like it would feel even more uneven and off. And so by having this sonic undercurrent of just, I don't know, quirky is the thing that comes to mind most often. Like it really helps, as an audience member watching it, it convinces you that this is on purpose. Like this is what this is. Like it's weird, but this is what they were going for. And so it's if they had anything else, I just don't I feel like this movie would have just failed.
I would hope that it would be on purpose. I would imagine the only way you could get this sound by accident is if you threw a bunch of random instruments down the stairs.
Oh, come on. That's a bit rough.
Hey, I can admire their ambition. Doesn't mean I like it.
There's often these solo instruments too. Like you talk about the squeeze box or the banjo, and you get these kind of highlighted moments of, one particular instrument. And it feels like a small group of instruments that they're playing with. And we also have this really kind of small band of people, right, at this fort, mostly men. And they're all kind of coming together from weird places. They're not necessarily friends, but they have to work together, and they all have their own issues and personalities. And so it feels like this is also a representation of that. What if these characters that we had laid out in front of us had to somehow get transformed into a musical instrument, and then you had to use those to make a score? That's what it feels like they did here.
No, I agree completely. Looking at the musical groups and looking at the soldiers at the fort, immediately I just think the island of misfit toys.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to make this work, even though we don't.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I have to say, just moving on slightly, is that
yeah,
I am a massive, massive fan of horror films set in the suburbs and horror films set in the wilderness. So we get an establishing shot of the mountain range, and already I'm hooked. If this is our only location, I'm happy. The feeling of isolation that remains throughout the film, nailed it here.
Yeah.
But we get
I was just going to say, I love those wide shots and just the mountains, and those paired with, we get a lot of intimate shots, obviously, as it goes on, of the people, people's faces and the caves, and just that, that isolation and the claustrophobia at the same time.
Also, it's very convincingly done to make it look like California and not, I think it was filmed in Slovakia.
Oh, was it? Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Hence the snow coming down very, very hard at some times and then just completely gone the next because of temperature flux. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Another flashback shows us a whole story of during the battle, an overwhelmed and in shock Boyd simply lays on the ground and plays dead while his desperate soldiers call out his name for help. Immediate trauma. And it honestly annoyed me the first few times I saw it. Right now, I'm so heartfelt towards Boyd. I just want him to succeed in everything because this is so traumatizing. Even more traumatizing is the introduction of Jeffrey Jones, which we get next. Makes his first appearance as Colonel Hart. Now, Rachel, we just covered Stay Tuned on our last episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a problem with Jeffrey Jones. I'm sure everybody listening knows his history. But I feel like he's only played two characters very well. The Dean of Students from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Colonel Hart from Ravenous.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I do not disagree with you. I think Deadwood I haven't seen that in a while, but I
Yes,
remember
okay.
like that character was like, it's like, okay, yes, he is that person. He's always just, I mean, yeah, we don't have to get into him as a person, but he always just plays that just really, I don't know, kind of
Detestable?
sleazy. Yeah. And just like, I don't know, not always a good person.
I see Jeffrey Jones. I think Howard the Duck.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Beetlejuice.
Oh,
Yeah?
okay.
A little Charles Dietz action there.
But performance-wise, I think this might be the best performance that I've seen Jeffrey Jones have.
Right?
He really knocks it out of the park here. From a performance standpoint, as much as I, consider something like Beetlejuice more iconic to, my viewing history and stuff like that, I don't think any of it touched the quality of his performance and delivery in this movie.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. He has like a weird welcoming quality here. Of course, that's what he's supposed to be doing in the scene. But as you said, he's nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the setup of the walnut knife, which we get to later on in the film. Frustrated, he uses a book to crush the walnut. Loved that, as dumb as it was. But the smart and well-read man breaks down a convenient setting for the plot. So, in brief, the fort is a way station for travelers. During the winter, they don't really see many people, so they only have a skeleton crew there, which I think, from a screenwriting perspective, is a wicked way to break down the characters we get to meet immediately. We get Private Toffler, their man of religion, I guess played by Jeremy Davies. Major Knox, doctor and resident drunk. Veterinarian, but he is the doctor. So just hope you don't get sick.
Yeah, that was a good line.
Private Reich, the soldier, Neil McDonough, who I don't really think fits with this group of outcasts. But next we have Martha, played by Sheila Tousey, and her brother George, played by Joseph Running Fox, who, quote, both came with the place. And Private Cleves, the addict, who is sometimes the cook, I guess, played by David Arquette. Now, open conversation here. How does everyone feel about this cast?
I love it.
It works, right?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't even get mad at David Arquette. I just feel like he's like this. He's just such a sweet little baby boy. Like I can't ever get mad at him, like his characters or him as a person. Like I just like his laugh would like that's all he would have to do, and I'd just be like, oh, yeah, it's okay. You're the best.
Well, David Arquette is a podcast favorite around these parts.
Okay, good.
When used properly, steals the show.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy Davies. I've always had not an issue, but I wish he would do something different than always play I don't even know what the right term is. The weird one. I don't like using that, but he's always
twitchy.
He's always the strange guy. Here it works. Like they wrote his character well for him, or cast him properly and changed the character appropriately. Major Knox, I get a kick out every time I see him. And I think this goes to the fact that Steven Spinella is mainly a stage actor. And this is a comedy character through and through.
Yeah. He's great at those kind of exaggerated performances.
How do you both feel about Neil McDonough?
I mean, he's got like just such a, I'm just talking like physically, his look is just, I mean, so unique. Like he's terrifying. But you know how sometimes you look at actors and you're like, it's like, oh, there's 5 actors that look similar, to them, and sometimes it's kind of like, oh wait, is that? Oh no, that was this other actor that was in that movie. It's like cannot be confused with anybody else, like he is very like has this look and is great at playing these kind of really steely characters, these really stoic, tough characters, and
shows up everywhere.
Oh yeah. He has no problem finding work. That's for sure. Whether or not the quality, I don't know. Sometimes he's great. Sometimes he's meh.
He was probably the worst M. Bison ever.
All right.
I don't know if you probably haven't seen that Street Fighter film. I'm just gonna let
Oh,
it go.
I've seen Street Fighter. Don't worry.
Okay. All right.
I'm just a biased Neil McDonough fan. I have been for a long time. I do kind of agree that he does kind of stand out a little with this group. Maybe something as simple as dyeing his hair and having him fit in just a little bit more visually, but he almost feels like he looks a little too modern for the setting. It's just weird to say. I can't think of the right descriptor words.
Yeah. I will say I like his character because his character is kind of like the only actual capable person there.
You gotta have the one hard-nosed soldier type, right?
Yeah.
It just so happens that it's with an actor that like you could just get lost in his eyes for hours.
Totally.
Oh, I agree. I just wish I could see Neil McDonough in a role where he isn't so confident all the time. What?
Yeah.
Just kind of had a moment where all three of us drooled over Neil McDonough.
I mean, totally. Like those eyes. Like, are you kidding me? He's like a husky. Like you're just
piercing.
Like you're just like, oh my gosh. Like you're just beautiful in like a really like weird way. I think it is the blonde though that makes him stand out here.
How are his eyes so piercing but so warm at the same time? Like
I
don't know about warm.
He kind of does fit the setting right though, because he feels cold as a person. Like he feels cold. Like David Arquette is warm. This guy is cold. And so, but in the setting that he's in, I mean,
I was gonna say
that moment in the river is iconic, and it's just like 2 seconds, but you instantly know that character.
Yeah, nobody else is standing in freezing water except for this guy.
Screaming at the top of his lungs.
I love it.
I really enjoy Sheila and Joseph as Martha and George. I kind of wish those characters were in the film a bit more. But one thing I learned from one of the commentary tracks is they were originally named George and Jefferson, and they were brothers. I don't think we needed the George Jefferson reference. Yeah,
it's weird.
It is weird, right? And somebody suggested changing Jefferson to Martha and have them be brother and sister. And I think that works so much better.
Oh, man, kudos to that person.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it was Antonia Bird being like, hey, guys, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of dudes. Maybe we can have one, female character. That'd be nice.
Cutting to the dinner scene where Toffler says grace, and we immediately get how this fort runs. No one really cares about saying grace. Reich starts eating immediately. Hart just stops the prayer with, so did anyone do anything today? Again, Jeffrey Jones doing really well and immediately provides a great sense of camaraderie here at the fort.
Don't forget that Neil McDonough stares right through Tolfer, Jeremy Davies, as he's eating before the grace.
Well, that's because Neil McDonough doesn't know how to blink. Flashback again, though. We need to break this brevity. Or levity, sorry. Boyd's body is carried off the battlefield and tossed on the cart with his dead soldiers and CO, the blood running into Boyd's mouth. This changes him, and he crawls out from the bodies and single-handedly takes out the command post. Again, getting a bit more character growth for Boyd before the setting.
Are we to believe that blood gave him some supernatural strength there? Or is just coincidence?
I believe so.
And I'm reading into it.
I think it is. No, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it is very intentional.
Sorry, excuse me. Martha and Cleves are sent out for a supply run, and that night, Boyd and Hart share the recently passed out Knox's bourbon, and during that conversation, Boyd spots a strange man looking at them through a window. They rush outside and find the collapsed man near death, take him inside, and do everything they can to warm him and let him rest by the fire. This man, played by Robert Carlyle, wakes up the next day, introduces himself as F.W. Calhoun, and relays his story. Interesting story. Out in the forest for 3 months without food. Everyone immediately takes to that. Before that, he was in a party of 6 people heading west for a better life. I mean, we'll get into Manifest Destiny. Their guide, Colonel Ives, suggested a shortcut, which got them stuck in the mountains during a seemingly endless snowstorm, ended up having to take shelter in a cave, ran out of food, had to eat the oxen, horses, Calhoun's dog, belts, shoes, etc. And one day, Calhoun returned from collecting wood, discovered the rest of the party eating a member who had died. He couldn't help himself but partake, and this gets out of hand, leading to people being murdered for food. Everything led by Colonel Ives. As dark as this is, I kind of want to see this movie. It's definitely a mix of the story of the Donner Party as well as Albert Packer, which, I mean, if you do any research on this movie, both of those names come up frequently. I could honestly see a prequel short or something that could have been added as a special feature on this DVD. I think it would have been really interesting to see this, but it would give a twist away. At least I think it's a twist.
Yeah, they hide that twist for a really long time.
Yeah, and they don't really explain it fully, and that's a major problem I have with this movie, but we'll get to that. Is it safe to say none of us can see anybody other than Robert Carlyle playing Calhoun?
Safe. Yeah, he's amazing.
Absolutely amazing. And what have we really seen him in up until this point? Before 99, he had done what? Trainspotting and The Full Monty, maybe?
Yeah, I think those are his claims to fame, right?
Yeah. Next, though, we get one of my favorite elements of this film, and something I look for a lot in horror films and some TV shows. It's heart deciding that they have to go rescue Ives and Mrs. McCready, but before they depart, George warns Hart and Boyd about the Wendigo. So the Wendigo myth, very prominent in my upbringing, which I'll get to, but I'm curious, Sandro, Rachel, what are your experiences with this creature?
Well, I've never actually met one, so I don't know if say I had experience with them.
The mythos, Sandro, the mythos. Other than like an episode of Supernatural.
For me, it's Stephen King and Pet Sematary, and it's probably, it's got to be like top 5 Native American indigenous people, stories that get co-opted when needed, right?
Definitely. For the longest time, I was always more so focused on seeing a physical representation in like a monster form, because I'm a really big monster guy. But growing up in Atlantic Canada, a lot of the native peoples here would tell stories about the Wendigo. So it was a very common story that we would hear as kids about a spirit that will prey on the weak and the greedy, especially if you're out in the woods. And I grew up in the forest. So I was always enamored with this idea of the danger that would come with being weak or being too greedy, and that something would take over me. The idea that if I ended up having to, like, if I was driven so to like eat a human being, I would do it forever and there was no escape, terrified me as a child, and definitely kept me on a decent path. But now I'm seeing representations growing up of like the Wendigo in the Marvel comic books, Wendigo on TV shows. One of my favorite representations would have been, I forget the name of the episode, but an episode of Fear Itself with Doug Jones. Probably one of the best TV representations I've ever seen of this creature. It's just nice to see this story handled seriously and sincerely. Sorry for the little rant there. It's just we don't get to see enough of this representation, and I really appreciated it.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not sensationalized in ways that it can be sometimes.
Yeah.
And I also just really like how it plays into the whole, like, some of the other ideas that they're touching on that have to do with, power and masculinity and that kind of stuff. So I think it all works really well together in a way that, never feels exploitative, and also just it's also not being super literal. There's room for interpretation, which I also think is really smart and really great.
Incredibly smart and very interesting, because I find that with Calhoun, we end up with, I mean, like people, like we already say, we assume if you're listening to this episode, you've already seen the movie. So with Calhoun, you've got the craving of power, greed to that extent. And then the other side, we have Boyd, who has been struggling with courage versus cowardice. I mean, I think he is actually courageous, but is convinced he's a coward.
He's guilty. He's embarrassed.
Exactly.
He's got PTSD.
Yep.
He had a completely reasonable response to, it's like Jack Burton, right? In Big Trouble. He's like, I'm a reasonable guy who's experienced unreasonable things. Like that's what he's going through. And yet he hates himself for feeling that way. And he gets awarded something that he knows he doesn't. I mean, he wins, a hero award, and he knows he doesn't deserve it because he didn't really do anything heroic. He just happened to sneak in.
Yeah, and then immediately after he gets the medal, he's stripped down for being a coward. So any potential pride, I guess, he could get from getting that medal, which he didn't get anyway, he's just beaten down even further. Yeah. So
he admits what he does. The military is embarrassed and says, well, we can't have that. We can't have people knowing that our officers are cowards. So we're going to ship you off to the middle of nowhere where, you can get over this and nobody has to know what really happened.
Yeah. But in sending him there, they're also technically promoting him in status. So it's like, all right, well, we're going to literally just keep up appearances by
fail
giving you
upward,
a promotion.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, but we're gonna then punish you by giving you that promotion in like the most unideal situation you could possibly have, and he knows it too. When Jeffrey Jones asks him what he got the award for, he just thought it says cowardice.
Yeah,
It's not a secret to him.
He is broken. He is broken at this point, and we see him struggle with that a lot.
And Guy Pearce conveys that with his eyes so well.
I know. He's a good sad boy.
I know. It's heartbreaking.
He's a character that maybe most people don't acknowledge, but he's broken from start to finish in this movie. He just gets more broken at some points.
He does, I will say, I think he has some moments where he has to make choices and he chooses to live. And, when he is stuck in the pit, time passes by and he could just lay there and die, but he makes a choice. And I think part of him is, once again, not proud of his choice, but there's also part of him that's he's struggling with the morality of the whole situation that they find themselves in and having to confront what he wants to do about that. And we do see him fight. So there's still life in him, and he's not willing to fully give over.
Well, he fights it pretty much till the end. Like every single time he makes one of these decisions, it's a matter of mentally his willpower takes him right to the final point where he just can't anymore. And his body breaks and he makes that decision. But he holds out longer than anybody else could have. It's literally just like, I got to the literal point where my willpower shut off and just my subconscious need to live kicked in.
Yeah. And it's remorseful in a way because I think he's motivated a lot of the time by the other people around him. So in the past, he made some decisions where he didn't stand up for those around him, his fellow soldiers. So I think what we see him grappling with too is I can do something about this. So I'm going to try at least. And that's maybe his way of, making right with his past mistakes, or at least attempt to, because it's not so much about him saving his own life, and he's not trying to take over power. He's not trying to serve himself. He's attempting to right this wrong, because at the end he could save himself, but he doesn't, because that's not the point of this.
And that's like you say, in the pit, he ends up having to eat Reich to make it back to the fort to warn the others, save others. He ends up eating the stew so he can try and put a stop to Calhoun. It's only when he doesn't have anybody else left to save but himself that he can hold back and not indulge. He's a very interesting character, lost in a movie that I think a lot of people just don't understand.
Yeah. agree.
I can't believe we're only at the point now where they ignore the warning of the Wendigo. and Hart, Boyd, Toffler, George, Reich, and Calhoun set out. And they do a great job here at making Calhoun seem innocent. Because I forget what it is, but Hart keeps dropping something and Calhoun keeps grabbing. He's like, Colonel Hart.
It looked like a hat or a pouch or like maybe like a gunpowder pouch or something.
Yeah. You get a really weird moment between Boyd and Calhoun talking about the effects of eating human flesh and blood. And then crazy Toffler topples down the mountainside after finding a bone and being super excited about it, suffering a bad wound to his side.
What an idiot. Can't even walk.
And it's that night that we get what I consider to be the most unsettling part of the film. It's just Toffler waking up and screaming upon realizing that Calhoun is licking his wound. Just the idea of that, the sound effects, the acting, the look on Carlyle's face when he's confronted with it, and Reich's immediate reaction to kill him. Like, so much happens in such a short amount of time, and it's such an alien situation for any of us today. I just found it very disturbing.
Yeah, and it's gross.
It's very gross. Very, very gross.
He tries to cover it up by saying he had a bad dream.
Yeah, the nightmare defense.
What idiot is buying that?
I'm curious to know what idiot is buying Carlyle's performance when they get to the cave, where he starts what Hart says Calhoun is getting spooked.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to be so in control of his motions throughout the rest of the film. I don't really know what he's doing here, because he's not really distracting Toffler by shaking his hands around and making weird sounds. Did I miss something? Or like, what do you two think is going on here?
I mean, I think he's just like relishing in the moment that he convinced he lured them back to his lair, right?
Yeah.
And like, clearly there's something, supernatural or mystical going on some level, because we do see like these people heal after they, partake in man meat. And,
Yes.
and so,
Right.
well, I mean, at some point we have to just admit that there is a very queer reading of this film that you could get into, but
100%.
that's here. So, and so it's like at this moment, it's like the source of his power. This is like his home base. And so it's like he can't contain it anymore. Like, until this point, we've seen him kind of play the victim. And it's only here that we start to see like, oh, wait, no, he's like, this whole thing was a plan. So I don't know. It's weird though, but I love it.
I love it too. But speaking of containment, who let him go? Who untied him?
Yeah, I don't remember. Or did he cut it himself?
He didn't have the knife at that point. His hands were free when he just started digging into the ground. So I'm thinking that
were they tied in front and then he dug? I can't remember. That's a good point. I don't know. Small point. Doesn't really matter. Anyway, Boyd and Reich have entered the cave to investigate. We were talking about Toffler and Calhoun. Hart's making a horrible idea making Toffler watch him after what just happened. That's stupid.
Reich finds the stripped skeletons of 5 humans and realizes that Calhoun killed everyone in the party. He and Boyd try and warn the others, but Calhoun has already killed George, gutted Hart, and is chasing Toffler through the woods. And this is where we get one of those weird bits of comedy that I brought up before, where Calhoun pulls the gun and tries to shoot Toffler, but it misfires, and we get the line of, "That is so annoying."
I love it. Because like,
I knew you would.
That's the moment where it's like, the veil has been pulled off, the curtain's pulled back. Like, you see him for what he is. And it's just like, this whole thing was a ruse. It's just like so dramatic and goofy. And it's like, yeah. Just like,
goofy is the perfect word.
So annoying. It's just that classic, like, villain turn where you just, I don't know, the mask gets ripped off and it's fabulous.
I love how he says to Toffler, "Run." Right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, not only is the veil removed, and he probably hears the two guys in the cave are shouting like he's did it, he's the killer, he did it, whatever. And he's just like, all right, well, now that they know, I can have some fun with this.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no actual fear in him, even though he knows these two guys are coming because they got a bone to pick with him.
Oh, God. The one thing that I only picked up on with rewatches is before he heads out chasing Toffler, Calhoun covers Hart with his pelt. And I'm thinking, why would he do that? Well, that's revealed later on. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing it was already planned on... Well, he had this whole thing planned up before. But there's something that I kind of have a problem with, and I'm hoping you two can enlighten me here. If you look up any plot synopsis of the movie, it says that while Reich and Boyd are in the cave, Reich discovers the skeletons and realizes that Calhoun is Ives.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get that. Because all he did was look down and see the uniform. Doesn't say anything about Ives whatsoever. He says Ives when he sees the uniform on the ground.
I thought it had the name on it.
Well, Ives was supposed to be one of the survivors. So to me, it's like, oh, he didn't survive. Not, oh, Calhoun is Ives.
I think the implication here, or at least perhaps what Reich got from it, is that he took his clothes off to put on the clothes of another person, but he didn't like redress it on any of the other skeletons. It was just set off to the side. I think it was just the placement of that.
But none of the other skeletons were wearing clothing.
But none of their clothing was there either.
I thought it was just kind of strewn about. Now, this is me being a complete idiot. I acknowledge that right now.
Yeah, dude, that's my job.
But
I don't think it's being an idiot. I think it's just a little vague.
But I also looked
a little bit.
Well, I looked into it too, and originally there was a different killer in the script, a character that doesn't exist in the movie anymore. So I'm wondering if they just tried to like patch something together really quickly. I don't know. I'll let it go. I'm wasting everyone's time. Sorry?
You're barking up the wrong tree, dude. Just leave it.
Okay. All right. So Boyd and Reich pursue Calhoun and Toffler through the mountains, eventually discovering Toffler's disemboweled corpse. Reich takes a knife to the chest and falls off a cliff. Boy, does he.
Oh, man.
And Boyd shoots Calhoun in the chest, but he pops right back up from the gunshot. Going into more of a cowardice for Boyd here, instead of fighting Calhoun, he just decides to jump off the cliff as well.
I don't know if it was cowardice or just he had nothing. Like, he shot the guy and he's like, I can't beat this thing right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I would probably go left or right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm disappointed that Reich didn't put up more of a fight.
Yeah, we were led to believe he would be the heavy for...
Yeah, and he just literally runs in and gets a knife in the chest. It's like, you couldn't have had him at least tussle with him a little? Something?
Well, I mean, everybody's fallible, right? I think it's just, because we see him as being kind of the most capable, the first one to run in, like, we think that he is going to be that person, right? That kind of that hero to come in and save everybody.
Yeah,
but then just immediately literally gets pushed off a cliff. So it's
well, I don't even think necessarily that he'd be the hero that would save it, but if he's the one that is the tough one, seeing him actually fight with Ives and get completely overpowered would just heighten the threat of Ives even more, because you're like, oh, this is the most powerful guy, and he just got tossed aside. But anybody could have thrown a knife at another one of these people. I don't know. It felt very anticlimactic for that.
You say I'm a nitpicker?
Well, yeah, dude. I'm actually analyzing something that happened in the movie.
I had an idea, man, but yeah, I think it makes Calhoun or Ives, we'll call him either or at this point, much more of a formidable opponent, because like he wouldn't be able to fight. I don't think he would be able to fight Reich hand to hand at this point. Especially not having eaten in a very long time. But the fact that he's so good with a blade, like he can throw like that and take out one of the strongest, like this is a real danger of a human being. And definitely Boyd's going to be terrified by seeing that.
Yep. He's like, nope, I'm out of here.
Exactly. And of course, he survives that fall, smashing into Reich's body, and two end up in the pit that we talked about earlier. Thoughts on why Reich attacks Boyd? I'm not going to lie. It's another point where I was confused.
I don't know. He's like a dog that gets, when
Wounded
a dog
animal?
is like hurt, and just like they're biting at you, but it's like they don't know what they're doing. They don't mean to. I also think there's something to be said for like Reich didn't ask to be in that situation and Boyd did. And it's just like, why didn't you? Like, why are you here? Why didn't you stay and fight? Like, what are you doing, you dummy?
Yeah, I think it's just like the last desperate grasp of a dying man. Like, I don't
Entirely
think
possible.
Yeah, I don't think it's meant to be anything else.
Well, Reich eventually dies from his wounds, and Boyd suffers a broken leg. Really creepy shot of Calhoun trying to smell his way around the forest, which I enjoyed. Boyd trying to reset his leg, slowly freezing to death. He eventually succumbs to his hunger, eats Reich, providing him the strength to climb out of the pit and stagger back to Fort Spencer. After some medical attention from Knox and some much-needed rest, Boyd's confronted by Martha, who warns him that you can't stop the Wendigo. The only way out is death. And I think we all know that's how this movie's going to end at this point. After an undetermined amount of time, we see that General Slauson at Fort Spencer telling Boyd that they've investigated the cave and found no signs of wrongdoing. Trying to be indignant, saying Windigi, stuff like that. Nice. Yeah. He's convinced that Boyd's lying and gives him a chance to change his story. And I think they've done a brilliant job setting up this scenario because Slauson already knows that Boyd's a coward. Well, he thinks he's a coward. Only Boyd and the audience know the truth. But there's also the fact that there is absolutely no reason for anybody else at the fort to believe anything that Boyd says to be true. Yeah. So the big reveal that we get next, they brought on an interim CO until they can replace Colonel Hart, and that is, of course, Colonel Ives. And this is where I think you're right, Sandro, because the uniform does fit him perfectly. So nobody believes Boyd when he says that he's Calhoun. Of course, Knox has no memory of what Calhoun looks like because he was wasted. A weird examination of Calhoun's or Ives' shoulders, which should bear some wound from when Boyd shot him, but there's nothing. I'm honestly just like slamming through this next little bit till we get towards the ending. Is there anything I'm missing that anybody would like to bring up?
How did he get this position?
Colonel Ives?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Like, how much time would you imagine has lapsed since he, I guess, ate all the people in the cave initially, lured out the people from the fort, ate those people, and then somehow connected with the military and was like promoted to this position?
I think that Boyd has been in that pit for a while. And so that gave him some time to go back to the cave, clean up his mess, and get his uniform. And, because I think he starts to put together this other plan where and I think that's why he, throws the pelt over Hart, because he thinks of the plan where we can just stay here and have a source of, people coming to us year round. Exactly. And so it's in his best interest to reconnect with the military.
Yeah. And keep in mind, too, that it was already accepted by the military that he was going to be leading a group of people on their pilgrimage west. Mm-hmm. So nobody really knew how long that was going to take. Of course, winters are tough. So he would get back in touch with them when he could.
He's like, they made it. I'm done. Everything's fine. Where should I go now?
Yeah. I think that's exactly what happened. Dinner scene where Boyd says he only eats meat as a last resort, but then we cut to Boyd's hallucination of killing Cleves.
Why?
Just to show that the hunger is eating away at him. Yeah. Great use of the chess scene. I thought that happens next. Knox and Cleves playing. It's basically what Boyd and Calhoun are doing the entire time. I did like the fact that Boyd just kind of takes the knife earlier on in the scene, and he's trying to stay awake even though he's absolutely exhausted. And Calhoun or Ives knows exactly what's happening and is just trying to make him look even more of a fool in front of the rest of the people there. The nighttime conversation between Calhoun and Boyd. Okay, sorry, I'll just keep calling him Colonel Ives now. Ives knowing that Boyd ate Reich. I hate this. I hate having to jump back and forth, but I was really uncertain this entire time, as you can tell. Ives tells Boyd about his near-death experience with tuberculosis. I heard a story from a scout about how consuming a person gives you their strength and spirit. So we did, consequently, eating the scout first. And there's another little bit of this humor, which at this point has fully grown on me now. I'm not looking for it, but I'm happy when it happens. Rachel, up until this point, have you seen this movie as an allegory for Manifest Destiny whatsoever?
That's interesting.
Because I didn't.
I was like, I haven't actually. Like, I thought it was much more. I don't know. Like, had much more to do with like, yeah, just like power and masculinity and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I never. That wasn't my first takeaway. I have heard that before, and I always forget to watch it with that in mind because that's not really what comes to me. But I think where it's happening and with the travelers and the settlers coming in, and I can see that.
I am right there with you 100%. I completely forgot that that's what a lot of people believe this movie to be about until it's almost directly mentioned towards the end of the film. I thought it was about masculinity. I thought it was about power, control, strength, weakness. And then as I was doing more research, everyone's like, oh, manifest destiny this, manifest destiny that. And there is one line here where Ives is talking to Boyd, and it was right after I had encountered Manifest Destiny in a synopsis. And Ives says, here I am 1 year later, feeling more alive than ever before. And that's what surprises me about you, Boyd. You've tasted it, felt its power, yet you're resisting. Why? And Boyd's response is simply, because it's wrong. Followed up with Ives, morality, the last bastion of a coward. Yeah. I can easily see this applied to Manifest Destiny, which honestly, as Canadians, we're not overly familiar with. So I actually had to do a bit of research on that too.
I mean, that's like the whole, the United States, right? Like that's
exactly
that's how our whole country came to be. So I can definitely, it makes sense. Yeah, and you've also got, at the beginning, right? Like the Mexican-American War and that kind of stuff. So, that I for sure think that is an idea that's being discussed here. I don't know. It never comes first to my mind, but that's probably just my privileged place that, that I'm not seeing it through that lens necessarily.
Well, that's why I asked you specifically, because as Canadians, I assumed, well, I knew for myself that it just went right over my head. I didn't know about Sandro, but as an American watching this, I wondered if that was something that would come to mind.
It hasn't, but that does make perfect sense. And it fits in similarly. The power idea, that's the same thing, right? Like you just want more and more, and you just will, demolish anything in your path. And it doesn't matter what it takes to get that. That's
Consume.
the same idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Boyd attacks Ives and is promptly put under arrest. Martha discovers all of the fort's horses have been slaughtered. Then we get the reveal of Cleve's corpse atop a roof. Honestly, I felt really sad to see a dead David Arquette. I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
Believing Boyd to be responsible, Knox sends Martha on a trek to fetch General Slauson. Later that evening, Knox is killed by an unseen assailant brandishing Knox's missing sword. This murderer is immediately revealed to be Colonel Hart, who managed to survive his wounds after Calhoun or Ives fed him his own men. Yeah. Thoughts on that twist? I didn't see it coming the first time, but I'm 100% okay with it.
It makes sense. I didn't see it coming either, but I think that's kind of like where, his final plan starts to come into like, oh, okay, I see what they're going to do. And because of like the remote nature and the time period, it's like, oh, you probably could get away with that for a while, tying it back into Manifest Destiny and like the greed, power, greed struggle thing. It's also extremely short-sighted. right?
Yeah.
It's because it's like, yeah, okay, you're just gonna like literally eat all these people, and then what? You're just gonna wait for people to wander into your trap like a Venus flytrap? Like, okay, or maybe you could have like, I don't know, like parceled out these people a little bit more, the same way where if, colonizers were coming in, it's like maybe it would have benefited you to like work with the people that have been living here for, centuries. Maybe that would have been smarter than just killing them all.
But they wanted it, Rachel. They wanted
No,
that.
I know, but exactly. That's the thing. It's like, but and it makes sense why it would be Hart, because Hart has been there. And so by having him still be around, it would give validity to what's happening. Because if people start disappearing, Hart would have some sort of precedence and like, okay, well, if he says that's what's happening, that must be what really happened. Like, oh, those people must have just got sick and died. Like, oh, weird. Whereas if Ives just comes in and everybody starts dying, people might start to ask questions.
I think it is hinted that it is a little bit more strategic, because he references the people that are going to be passing through there, like going for gold rush farming.
Mm-hmm.
So they might not be people that are necessarily going to be easily identified or associated with the military. He wants to set up base here.
Yep.
Have like a core group of people that are with him in it.
Yeah.
And the fact that he hid all the bodies so that they didn't find anything, he could say, yeah, Hart must have survived and we found him. And then we could pick away at the ones that, are not going to be noticed.
Well, be selective is what he says. Selectively pick off travelers.
Yeah.
But yeah,
he even says something like he doesn't want to break up families or something like that. So I think he really is like, we'll see some stragglers that are just greedy people going for gold. Nobody will miss them,
But isn't that what everybody says who like is, after power? Like, I mean, right? Like how much money is enough? Are you ever going to be happy? Like what's the ceiling? Like,
exactly.
You think like, oh yeah, I would be happy with $1 million, but then you see $2 million in front of you. Are you going to say no to that? That kind of thing.
I'm just talking about the planning phase, not the actual practice phase, right?
Yeah.
So would they actually stick to that, be successful? I don't know. I just think that
God, no.
Makes sense from just like a strategy standpoint on why he would pick a remote outpost that doesn't get visited, that has a reason to have a skeleton crew most of the time, so that it can be a smaller group of his people instead of, a completely populated fort. It's written well into why he would be at that location.
Oh, totally.
It does make sense, yes. But we also know that he can't control himself when it comes to eating. So it doesn't matter, as Rachel was saying, like how many people he tried to pick off and like, maintain his, eating. Be selective about what you eat when you eat. He's just going to keep eating if there's food there. Like anytime he's presented with the ability to eat somebody, he does. Like he's relentless. So this is a plan that's just going to snowball out of control completely. Boyd refuses to join them and is fatally stabbed by Ives, but will survive if he eats Knox. And Boyd eventually acquiesces, much like Ives tells him he has to when it comes to Manifest Destiny. Interesting move and a viable win-win for Ives, because either Boyd joins them or dies. And finally, we get the return of the walnut knife. I've been waiting for this. Hart is now strong enough to crush the nuts with his hand. Boyd guilt trips Hart into freeing him of his chains with a condition that he kills Ives, but first must quickly kill Hart.
What? Guilt trips? He flat out says, "Let me free. Can you be trusted?" No.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
But no, he plays with those emotions, and I think he does it in a very, very smart way. Because he can read what Hart's going through, because he knows what Hart's going through. Hart's not a bad person. He's just trying to convince himself that what he's doing is what he needs to survive. But his humanity, or like, I don't know, he hates what he's become. He doesn't want to continue, and he just needs that little push from Boyd to right the wrongs, but he can't do it himself, and he knows Boyd will. And Boyd does not hesitate whatsoever.
Not even a little bit.
The look on Ives' face as the blood hits the window is one of the better shots of the film, I find. Because he's not shocked. He's just you can see like the gears in his head, the wheels are turning. Like, how do I do this now? What's my next move? And this leads to our final battle between Boyd and Ives. I'm not really going to go into much detail here, but feel free, either of you, to throw in comments because it's a crazy entertaining fight, but ends with Boyd throwing himself and Ives into a giant bear trap. And this is the part I'm curious about because Ives tells Boyd that if Boyd dies first, Ives will eat him. No questions asked. But ask what Boyd will do if Ives dies first. And again, this puts Ives in a win-win situation because who does not expect that Boyd will resist and the two will just die? Like, he's already shown that he can't. So this is his one courageous turn, I guess, that we get to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think it's a win-win for Ives because Boyd is content to outlast Ives to know that he can't eat him to come back and then just die himself.
To Ives, this I think is a win-win because I don't think he believes that Boyd will be able to resist. And this is like it going back to what I was saying about the game of chess between Knox and I'm forgetting David Arquette's name right now.
Cleaves.
Cleaves, sorry, thank you. It seems like that's what Ives has been doing with Boyd this entire time, and now he's convinced he's in checkmate, and he just isn't. Martha and the general return. Slauson treats himself to some of the stew cooking on the fire, enjoying it. And what do we think happens with the general now? Because he eats a fair amount of Knox.
I think he gets sick and he doesn't know why he's feeling that way.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, but I'm like, I really hope this isn't a cheap setup for a sequel.
No, yeah, I just looked at it. It's like, he's gonna catch this. But if you don't know, like, why would you think to eat human meat? Like, you would just maybe you have these cravings, but I would think that you would more just like think that you were going, losing your mind or something. I'm not sure that you would actually try to eat human.
I would think it goes back to when Boyd was under the bodies in like when he was captive and got his medal. Mm-hmm. In that, okay, I thought that perhaps at least the second time through that he got the strength, maybe even from the blood when he was in that pile. And that's how he's able to like actually lift himself out of the weight of this pile of people. At that point, because he didn't really know, other than being sick looking at the meat, which might not have been because he consumed it, but because he was buried in it.
Yeah.
He didn't like resort to it. He didn't become like cannibalistic at that point because it was just like an isolated incident. And this felt like it was sequel bait, but that just makes me question the mythos of a Wendigo because I'm like, is anybody that's a cannibal? Then like, whatever, fine, forget it. But if he's none the wiser on what he ate, he might just feel good that day and then get a little sick and whatever, move on.
Yeah.
All right. I asked the question because I knew the answer.
Oh.
And I think you're both going to be really irritated by it.
Uh-oh.
Originally, Ives was working for Slauson, and Slauson had orchestrated the whole thing. So he knew he was eating Knox at the time.
I mean, that kind of makes sense because, again, if you're going to set this up, how deep does it run, right?
I know, but I hate that. I hate it so much. I'm so glad they changed it. But this one scene, I think you could have removed.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I don't like that scene being in there at all. Whether it was sequel bait or alluding to another grander scheme that wasn't in the movie, I didn't want it in there.
Yeah. I think if it was acknowledged that Slauson knew, if that was a little bit more clear, like I get why, because it's like, of course, like, the power goes up, it's usually a trickle down effect. Like the corruption's usually the worst at the top, right?
Yep.
And so like it makes sense, like fitting into like these discussions of power and manifest destiny and that kind of stuff. I don't know. I like it that we don't see that.
Agreed, completely. Well, we end this film by cutting to the bear trap, where Ives does indeed die first, and Boyd holds out long enough to succumb to his wounds. And I really love that final shot of the film of the two of them almost in an embrace, pinned together by this bear trap, as we fade to black and roll credits.
So I do just want to touch on the fight very briefly.
Of course.
Because this fight felt very different from what I'm used to seeing in movies. It doesn't feel very movie big fight cinematography feel. It just feels really guttural, like two guys duking it out. And I really can't describe it super well, but recently we were watching things like Rocky and the way that they do quick cuts and impact and sound effects. It's so cinematic, where this is just so basic, guttural, two guys just trying to kill each other.
I mean, I think that, survival and obviously plays a part in this whole film. What would you do to survive? And just that kind of that primal ancient nature that's supposedly in all of us. Although I don't know what would happen if I was stuck out in the wilderness. Probably not this. And so I think we really see that kind of that animal nature come out here. Like these men are kind of reduced to their ancient selves a little bit, and it feels like they're fighting for different things. Like I think this is the first time that Boyd is actually standing up for himself a little bit and like summoning that courage and kind of just making the decision to not give in to that. And so I think that that's a big moment, and having it be like a little bit more, you said like Rocky or something like John Wick or something like that would not fit here. It needs to be much more.
It wouldn't fit here, but I think just my movie viewing mind just historically was still expecting the Hollywood bells and whistles to kick in with, I don't know, these two fighting on a rooftop with flames all around them. It didn't, it's not like this didn't fit the movie, but I guess just I'm not used to that in movies, and it felt appropriate for this film.
Totally.
Yeah, this isn't a final fight that deals with fisticuffs so much, like you said, Sandro. It's more so dealing with brute force, one hit, back and forth. Like, I'll stab you, you stab me. You definitely read into that more, too. I'm going to hit you through this, fence post. I'm going to hit you into this table. It's not a free-for-all. It's, can you outdo what I just did to you?
Yeah, this
prove
fight,
yourself better than me.
This fight, more so than any I can remember in a movie, is the physical manifestation of these two's final wills of who will come out on top.
Yep. It's very well done.
So I just wanted to point that out.
I liked it. No, it's a very good point. But that does it for the plot of Ravenous. I'm very curious. I don't know, Rachel, if you've researched the budget or gross of the film.
Not recently, but from what I remember in the past looking into it, it's not necessarily pretty.
Yeah. Normally I ask Sandro to guess, but I'd like both of you to take a guess for the budget, and then we'll follow up with gross.
I don't think it was a super big budget. I mean, the part that always throws me off is how big a name were the actors in this. But I think, they didn't go for the monster-looking Wendigos. There wasn't a lot of practical effects. It was very tame for locations.
A lot of practical effects. No real special effects.
Sorry, and when I say practical, I meant the more grandiose monster stuff. This couldn't have been that much unless the actors warranted a big salary. So I'm going to say it's $8 million.
Yeah, I was going to say, because really the two leads had not done a whole lot in Hollywood at this point, and the other actors that were really well known for playing secondary characters. So 8's a pretty decent guess. Rachel?
Yeah, I was going to say 8 to 10, somewhere in there would be my guess.
It cost them 12.
Oh, okay.
But I think that's because of the shift in directors and having to do reshoots and rewrites and stuff like that. I think we can all agree that we just assumed this movie would be a failure at the box office.
Well, I mean, Rachel kind of gave it away.
Sorry.
Ago, so.
But a quick guess what the gross of the movie. Now, this doesn't take into account home video sales or anything.
I would say $4 million.
I was gonna say 2. I'm sad.
And Rachel would be correct.
Oh God.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought
That
4
is
was too low.
Such a shame.
I
This
just
movie
like
is way too good.
I haven't actually ever watched like a trailer or like looked into what the marketing was, but like I feel like this is I just have to imagine this shows up on some like marketing team's desk and they're like, how do we do this?
Oh,
Like,
definitely.
you know, because it's like, oh, are we going to sell this as a horror film? Are we going to sell this as a like period drama? Is it a comedy?
Yeah, wait, there's comedy?
Like, what is this? And so something tells me that it was not represented well. I mean, you can even just see, like, if you just look at like the cover of it, like on IMDb, like that cover's awful. And like you are who you eat. Like, okay. Like, so clearly it's a cannibal film. The font on the cover of that poster is terrible.
Yeah.
And so I guess there's a trailer right here playing on IMDb. But I have to imagine that people didn't know what they were in for or went into it with different expectations. And then you get it. And I
saw the movie poster. I had no idea what the hell this movie was going to be.
Yeah, clearly neither did the person who made this. So it's, this poster. So.
Well, my DVD, the cover art's a bit different. It's the tip of a bloody knife, and it's got inset Robert Carlyle and Guy Pearce's heads. Just Ravenous written in front of it with the quote, "Survival is the only option." And when you turn it around, the first quote you see is from Roger Ebert that says, "I loved Ravenous. A cross between a vampire movie and a cannibalism movie."
What? Well,
right?
I guess I could see it in the way that there's a seductive quality to this movie.
Yes.
Like there is very much like a queer reading here. There is like, I'm sure there's dozens at least of pieces out there that if people want to like look into of, how you could interpret this as
there definitely are. And they're quite interesting.
Yeah. Like, so that is for sure here. I'm just not one to speak on it necessarily. And so I could see that playing into like the vampire thing, like not wanting to, there is something appealing about this lifestyle, but what does it cost? Like, what do you have to give up? That kind of thing. So I can see that being part of the vampire thing, but I don't know.
Vampire does not immediately come to mind for me.
No. Yeah, no.
The ratings I found rather interesting too. We normally go IMDb and then we do both scores on Rotten Tomatoes. So out of 10 for IMDb, we'll start with Rachel.
Oh gosh, I don't know, like 6. I feel
Sandra?
like people probably don't like this.
Sandra, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm going to go 6 as well. I feel like this one could go either way. People could have loved it. People could have hated it.
See, I guessed 7.
7's kind of like the cop-out guess, though. Like,
not when the answer is 6.9.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
Yeah, 6.9 out of 10. I'm surprised IMDb.
I'm surprised.
I expect them to shit all over this movie. Rotten Tomatoes, tomato meter, the critics gave it what? Open question.
47?
I would think higher. I would think time would be kind to this film. I feel like it's been reevaluated, in some ways. 47?
The critics on Rotten Tomatoes are very fickle.
Sometimes their reviews, I don't know if you go on Rotten Tomatoes that often. I'll go on just to laugh at the critics' reviews. A lot of them have no idea what they're talking about. And the sources they're coming from are newspapers I've never heard of.
Yeah,
I've actually tried to
search
search out
them too, yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know, 60? Is that too generous?
51.
Sad.
Oh, I was close.
The audience score really came through for us, though, on this.
I feel like that's going to be really high. This one has cult classic written all over it, in my opinion.
So what did it get?
82.
Rachel?
Wait, this is the audience score?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would think this would be higher because I think it would be. So I'm still gonna say like 70 though.
78.
Oh, dang!
Yeah, the best reviews it's gotten so far.
Wait, what was the audience or the critic score again?
51.
So I was off by 4 when I guessed 47, and I just guessed 82, and I was off by 4.
Good job.
Yeah, well
You're
done.
consistent.
Lee wrong. Let's just hop into awards, and then we'll get to final thoughts.
Perfect. So for the awards, we allow our guests to go first. It's a courtesy.
Oh, all right.
So for the first award, we asked you who was your least favorite character? That could be because of the character or the performance for any reason. Who was your least favorite character?
Least favorite. Toffler. Sorry, Jeremy Davies. It's not him. It's not his performance. The priest, religious character is just kind of annoying and boring. But I get it, because this whole film, there's a lot of contradictions, right, in this film, and you've got this priest who's like quiet and scared when you would think a priest would, not be necessarily quiet and terrified every moment of the day. So.
Perhaps a little bit more resolute in their beliefs.
Yeah, or not scared to die, right? Because you're going on to a better life. Yeah.
Okay, so between the two of us, Ben, you start with least.
Toffler.
Okay.
And it's not because I don't like his character so much in this movie, but it's because I also saw him play the exact same character in Saving Private Ryan.
Oh.
And yeah, they both work in those movies, but for the longest time, Davies was always the ridiculous, outcast, weird, quirky guy. And it just so happened that it worked in this film. I would like to see him have a little bit more of a presence. I would like to see him be a little bit less of an idiot, because him freaking out over that bone and then falling down the mountainside just seemed ridiculous. I did enjoy him trying to write his own hymn, and while in the tent trying to come up with lines, it's actually Ives that gives him the rhyming word that he's been looking for. I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do anything in the movie. He's just kind of there as fodder. And I felt like they could have used the character a little bit better. But in doing so, I think they probably would have had to recast it.
Yeah. Religion's not going to save you out in the wilderness. So.
That's the other tagline for the film. The Jeremy Davies cut. Sandro, who was your least favorite character?
Clean sweep. I had Toffler as well. And I have to actually disagree with you, Ben, because I found the bumbliness of him the least entertaining part. But I don't really have too much more to add that you both didn't already go over. So, Rachel, looking at the opposite now, who was your favorite character?
I mean, Robert Carlyle, of course. Ives, whatever you want to call him. Yeah, I think
Calhoun/Ives.
Yeah, I think he's just delicious in this character. I think that he just I like that he's not necessarily very physically imposing, but the way that he's able to kind of navigate the nuances of this character of being, a victim one minute and then kind of the danger in the next. And he never he's not really ever loud or overt. I mean, he's aggressive, but not aggressive in the way that we might think. And I just really appreciate that kind of menacing, cool, calm, and collected energy that he gives off. It's very, it's very impressive and effective.
So I lead off for best between Ben and I, and I'm with you on this one as well. I had Robert Carlyle is phenomenal in this movie. He plays the, kind of traumatized victim very well. And there's so many moments that even when he's trying to come up with an excuse to why he was licking Tolfer, it's he's so believable in that role. But then as the cool and cunning victim, he's phenomenal as well. And he steals the scene. Even when they're in the cave and he's, kind of chewing the scenery, he's still entertaining.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, we all agree on this one.
Oh, 2 clean sweeps.
Yeah. And the thing with this is that the Ives character is so intelligent and so animalistic that it's incredibly appealing and unnerving at the same time. And he likes to flip back and forth between that, depending on his surroundings. And he's just such an interesting character to watch. The way he toys with people, but also plays a victim. I love to hate him, but I love to love him at the same. It's very weird. It's hard for me to describe. He nailed this role. Robert Carlyle did such a great job.
Okay, so Rachel, what did you have for your favorite, or perhaps for a negative reason, most memorable line?
I mean, I love it when he goes so annoying. That makes me laugh. I love it all the time. But I already said that, so I'm going to say another one because I'm greedy. I do like it when we first meet, Calhoun, and he says, they're like, "Oh, I thought you said there was nothing, there was no food or whatever." And he said, "I said no food. I didn't say there was nothing to eat." And it's oh, that's very clever.
Ben, what did you have for your favorite or most memorable line?
I went with memorable, not favorite, and it's Toffler, of course. It was used in the trailer, but him screaming, "He was licking me," is very disturbing to me and has stuck with me since my first viewing in '99. Anytime anybody mentions this movie, I'm like, "He was licking me," and then immediately, that a weird soundtrack. Those are the first two things that come to mind. But I love them. I love this movie for that. Like, there's so much to enjoy, but that's the one line that really sticks out to me.
Okay.
Sandro?
I had morality. The last bastion of the coward.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly I think that I picked it because Carlyle's delivery is just so good. And especially in this scene where he has this kind of like candid conversation with Boyd after so many attempts that Boyd's trying to get him to slip up or uncover him. And it's like, oh, he just picked the right spot. And he had this very prim and very controlled like attitude. And just the line is just delivered. It's so well done.
Yeah, that's a fantastic pick.
All right. Our final award. Rachel, what did you have for your favorite or most memorable moment or scene?
I mean, I love the action sequence at the end. I think that whole thing is great. Mm-hmm. But I have a soft spot for when, Boyd and Ives are like by the fire and there's like a really kind of beautiful like 2-shot of them just like talking. And it's like Boyd knows what's up. Ives knows what's up. Like they both know each other in that moment. And they're just, it's that classic, like kind of standoff where it's like, now's not the time. So we're just going to have this conversation. And it's like, they're still trying to convince each other that each one's right. And it's beautiful the way it looks. And it's also just like a quiet moment where we really see like Boyd kind of struggling with the person he was, the person he is, the person he wants to be. And I think it's just a great, really, quiet moment between these two actors and characters.
Nice. I had Run.
Really?
There's something about the look on Carlyle's face where he's like his lip is starting to curl up because we got the reveal. He's holding a bloody knife. He kind of throws his hands out like, "What are you doing?" Right? And like, I just can't get that image out of my head. Right. And yeah, there's a little bit of brevity. There's a little bit of, humor with it, but that just, I can't get that out of my head. It's burned in there now.
Yeah, that's a solid one.
Ben?
I had to go with more of a memorable shot than scene because the scene only lasts a couple of seconds. And that's the final shot of the two of them in the bear trap at the end. There's something really beautiful about that shot. And I know if I took the time to sit down, I could write about it for quite a while. But seeing two people who oppose each other so much, ending up what looks almost like an embrace, but dying together, one trying to survive and the other accepting his fate and knowing that he's not going to succumb to his hunger. He's willing to resist, knowing that he'll die, is the right thing to do to end all of the pain for everybody. It's just there's so much said in a shot with no dialogue and just a little bit of music. I can't get over it. I love it so much.
Awesome. All right, so those are the awards. Now we're just going to get to our kind of final thoughts, overall feelings, recommendations on the movie. Rachel, where do you stand on 1999's Ravenous?
Hey, spoiler alert, I love this movie.
I did not get that.
Weird. I just think there's so much here to chew on. And I love the discussions and how the different readings that you can have on this film. I think it's beautiful. I love the performances. The soundtrack is weird and amazing. And the tone is weird and amazing. And I just think that it's, I hate, people always get mad when you're like, oh, this film's underrated. It's like, it's underappreciated. And it's cozy. It's a winter movie and always worth watching. So I highly encourage people to check it out if they haven't, or revisit it if you haven't seen it in a while.
Ben?
Oh, I fucking love this movie. I can't wait to watch it again. Like it is high on my list of recommendations. There are so many different ways to interpret this film, and I don't think any of them are really wrong. You're always going to get something interesting out of it, even if you take it at surface level. But you can just pick away at it. Like the characters are great, the acting is fantastic, the setting is amazing. Story, great. I mean, you want to get like Rachel. I have a bit of a history with film and television production management.
Okay.
So scheduling all of this stuff would have been a nightmare, especially in Slovakia right now. And the soundtrack, my God, what haven't I said about the soundtrack? It's absolutely amazing. I can just listen to it on its own now. I don't need the visuals. And people will, if anybody heard me listening to this, they'd think I was crazy.
Yeah.
Because it has to go with the film. But it's just so much fun. It is underrated. It is underappreciated, Rachel. You're right. But it's also not a movie you can really force on people, because I think the best way to enjoy this film is to stumble upon it yourself. So while I can say I recommend it, know that if you do watch it, you're going to get something that's a little bit different. But be open to it because it's fantastic. Sandro?
So I'm definitely not in the same boat as you two. That being said, I did enjoy it. I just didn't love it. It is definitely the better of the cannibal movies that we have covered. I recommend this one for one viewing. I don't think I enjoyed it as much the second time around.
You need time. You didn't give enough time. Come back to it in a year.
Like the first time around, I was really into it. And, there's missteps. I'm not as big on, the soundtrack. But for reasons that, for example, you guys like the soundtrack, its uniqueness, I enjoyed this movie for its uniqueness, because this is not like your typical horror movie. I don't even know if I was to recommend it to somebody if I would necessarily be able to say, yeah, it's a horror movie, because it feels so different from that. It burns at its own pace. It's not over the top gore and horror and stuff like that, but it's very intriguing. It gets you curious and it keeps you there until the end. Maybe a repeat viewing later on down the road, but I'd say watch it once. That's about all I can say about that.
And then watch it again.
All right, so that was our thoughts on Ravenous. If you guys want to share your thoughts with us, you can hit us up on social media. We are on Twitter at BSBargainBin, Facebook.com/BSBargainBin, BSBargainBin.com, and of course, comments in the YouTube section are always appreciated. If you haven't had a chance to check out our merch, there is a tab on the top of our website that will take you to our sweet merchandise page. Got wonderful logo that was done. Wearing the shirt right now. You can't see it, but trust me, I am. That being said, I just want to thank you, Rachel, so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. It's amazing having you on.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure was all mine.
Before we sign off, please let our listeners know where they can find more of you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Vinyl Girl, GRRRL. And on Instagram, I'm at The Vinyl Girl because the other one was taken. And you can also catch me periodically. I'm a co-host for the Losers Club podcast, which is a Stephen King podcast. I was recently on an episode. We just covered The Colorado Kid. So if you're a Stephen King fan, believe me, there's more there than you could ever dream of. And then I'm also co-host on the Pod and the Pendulum podcast, where we cover horror franchises. And right now we're going through the Phantasm universe. So that is a wild ride.
All right. I'll throw your Twitter link in the description just so that they can at least find one convenient source to check you out, because I stress that everybody should.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Ben,
Yes.
It has been a long time since you have had a pick.
A very long time.
Sir,
Yes.
what are we watching next week?
Well, we're going to cover another underappreciated and underseen movie. The DVD case tells me it came out in 92, but the internet tells me that's a fucking lie. So apparently we're watching 1993's California.
Oh my God. Wait, with Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
Ugh, you guys are killing me. Are amazing.
I think we got a book here. A book on some of the most infamous murders in American history. I want to go to where they lived and where they killed, and I want you to take the pictures, and I'm going to write the text.
Looking for somebody to take turns at the wheel and share expenses on a week-long cross-country Blue Highways tour of historic murder sites? Brian, who in their right mind is going to want to do that?
Early, tell me more about California.
Let's see. One thing, people think faster out there on account of all that warm weather. Cold weather make people stupid. That's a fact.
I guess that explains why there's so many stupid people around here.
I think we should have at least met them first. Beggars can't be choosers. They were the only ones to answer the ride-share note, remember?
Please don't let them be as boring as Brian's friends. Anything but that. You've got to be kidding me. Look at them. They look like Okies.
Oh, jeez, Early, they look kind of weird.
Just in case.
He can't help the way he was raised. Gotta feel sorry for him.
You feel sorry for him. That's so sweet. You cut your hair.
Early cut it. He said it makes me look more pretty.
You know, you and I, we got to talk about your good buddy Early.
Who said he's my good buddy?
You look good with a gun, Brian.
Now give another shot, you mean boy.
A week ago, you would never have picked up that gun. Never!
They say it's a tourist job. That sound like your boy?
There is a nationwide manhunt for Early Graves.
What's that?
Nothing, Brian. It was just the thunder.
I saw him kill a man!
You ain't never killed no one, have you, bro?
No.
Tell me something big time. How in the hell you gonna write a book about something you don't know nothing about?
He's a murderer!
Brad Pitt, Juliette Lewis, California.
Until next time, have a good one.
All the best.